In a quiet hole in the ground, a small hobbit finds a ring. It looks harmless. It rolls across the floor with a faint metallic ring, no different from any trinket forgotten at the bottom of a drawer. But behind that simple circle of gold lies a history that stretches back beyond the Shire, beyond Gondor and Rohan, beyond even the sun and moon themselves. To understand that little ring, you have to step out of the green comfort of hobbit fields and wander into a much older world, one woven from music, rebellion, fire, and loss. A world where gods walked under unfamiliar stars, where jewels were brighter than the sun, and where the very shape of the world was changed by pride. Tonight, you and I are going to walk through that world together. And if you enjoy disappearing into stories like this, well, you already know how to keep this journey going. The story of the Lord of the Rings doesn't really begin with Frodo, or Bilbo, or even Sauron. It begins with a sound. Before there was Middle-earth, before there were elves or men or dragons or rings, there was a great music, a single unimaginable being. The one, called Ilúvatar, brings forth a host of powerful spirits, the Ainur. To them, he gives themes of music, rich and layered, like threads of color waiting to be woven into something vast. They begin to sing. At first, the music is harmonious, voices blending, ideas rising and falling. You can imagine it like a cosmic orchestra, some voices deep and slow like mountains, others bright and quick like starlight. Through this music, the shape of a world begins to form, not physically, but as a vision, a story waiting for its pages to exist. But then, one voice pushes against the harmony. His name is Melkor, one of the greatest of the Ainur. He is powerful, ambitious, and restless. While others are content to follow Ilúvatar's themes, Melkor wants to create his own, louder, grander, bending the melody to his will. His notes clash with the others, weaving discord and tension into the song. This isn't just noise, it's the first shadow. Ilúvatar doesn't simply silence him. Instead, he responds with new themes, deeper and more beautiful, absorbing Melkor's rebellion and transforming it. Conflict becomes part of the art. Discord becomes contrast. Even the darkness is woven into a design too vast for anyone else to understand. In the end, the music stops. The Ainur see what their song has created, the vision of a world called Arda, with lands, oceans, mountains, and a future filled with joy and sorrow, triumph and tragedy. Some of them love this vision so much that they choose to enter it, to step inside the song and help shape it as it becomes real. Those are the Valar and the Maiar, the powers of the world. And somewhere far down the line of that story, in a small land called the Shire, a hobbit will put a plain gold ring in his pocket, unknowingly carrying the echo of that first discord. When the Ainur descend into the world, they don't come as vague spirits drifting in a void. They take form, not exactly like humans, but as mighty, perceivable beings. The greatest among them are the Valar, each with domains that reflect their nature. Seas and winds, earth and growth, stars and dreams. They arrive in darkness. At this early time, the world is raw. Mountains are raised, then shattered. Seas rage. Land masses shift. Time feels more like a slow heartbeat than a ticking clock. The Valar begin to shape Arda according to the themes they sang, smoothing its violent edges, carving out valleys, raising peaks. But Melkor comes too. He enters the world with the others, driven by his desire to rule it. Everywhere the Valar build, he tears down. Where they raise mountains, he breaks them. Where they dig seas, he fills them. Think of two sculptors fighting over the same block of marble, undoing each other's work in a cycle of creation and destruction that scars the very shape of the planet. This push and pull becomes the first great war, yet the Valar endure. They are not alone. Many lesser spirits, the Maiar, serve them, beings of great power who will later appear in guises you know, a wandering grey wizard, a fiery Balrog, a dark lord who once wore a fair face. At this point, though, there are no hobbits, no men, no elves, but they are coming. The Valar know that the children of Ilúvatar, elves and men, will awaken one day. They also know Melkor will try to corrupt or destroy them. Their work, in many ways, is a race against his malice, shaping a world that will be beautiful enough to love, but strong enough to survive. And like any good myth, their efforts are only partially successful. Before the first sunrise, light in this world doesn't come from the sun or moon at all. It shines from two immense, living trees. On a western continent far from where the stories of hobbits will unfold, lies the land of the Valar, called Aman. There, on a green hill, stand two colossal trees, Telperion, silver and pale, and Laurelin, golden and warm. They don't just sit in silence, they glow and ebb, their lights waxing and waning in a rhythm that creates a kind of divine day and night. This is the age of starlight and tree light. The world feels dreamlike, half-lit, full of possibility. But across the sea, on the main lands of Middle-earth, things are rougher. Melkor's shadow lies heavy over the mountains and forests. Strange creatures move in the dark. Deep below the earth, he has carved out fortresses and pits, gathering monstrous servants and shaping horrors that will haunt future ages. It's in this world that the firstborn finally awaken. Far to the east, under a sky lit only by the stars, the elves open their eyes. They are the first children of Ilúvatar, tall, fair, immortal in the sense that they do not age or die of sickness. Their souls are tied to the world itself. As long as Arda endures, so do the elves. They are fascinated by starlight, by water, by the shapes of leaves, and the music of language. Even their earliest word carry a kind of poetry, but not all eyes watching them are friendly. Melkor finds them. He sends shadows, creatures, whispers. Some elves vanish, taken in the dark and twisted into something else, something broken and cruel. Those are the first orcs, if the old tales are to be believed, elves that were mutilated, reshaped into mockeries of their former grace. The Valar eventually discover that the firstborn have awakened, and their response is drastic. They move against Melkor in force, storming his strongholds, breaking his armies, and capturing him. For a time the world is quieter. They invite the elves to come west, across the sea, into the light of the two trees. Many accept, some refuse and remain in Middle-earth. Others begin the journey, then turn aside, founding new clans and cultures along the way. Already, the great pattern of Tolkien's world is emerging. Summons and refusals, calls to higher realms, and choices to remain behind, each decision echoing down centuries. In that pattern, you can hear hints of stories to come, like hobbits who are called to leave their quiet land, some accepting the road, others clinging to home. In Aman, beneath the glow of the two trees, the elves reach their highest splendor. They build cities of white stone and tall towers. They craft jewels, forge blades, compose songs whose echoes will be felt millennia later. Some among them become legends, names that will flicker faintly even in the Lord of the Rings, like stars glimpsed through clouds. One of them is Fëanor. He is brilliant, proud, and terrifyingly gifted. Fëanor creates the Silmarils, 3 jewels that capture the very light of the two trees themselves. Imagine if someone could take the glow of a sunrise, the shine of starlight on snow, the feeling of standing in a warm summer evening, and lock it into crystal. That is what the Silmarils are to the elves. Not just beautiful, but sacred. They are also a problem, because wherever something priceless exists in Tolkien's world, you can be sure 2 things will come for it: desire and doom. Melkor, held prisoner in Aman for ages, pretends to repent. He watches, he whispers, he sees Fëanor's pride, the elves' growing divisions, the way they quarrel among themselves. Then, when his chains are finally loosed and he is allowed to walk freely, he begins to sow lies. He hints that the Valar are hoarding power, that the elves are prisoners in a golden cage, that their glory in Middle-earth has been stolen from them. With every whisper, suspicions deepen, trust frays, and then Melkor strikes. In a single, devastating act, he allies with a monstrous spider-like being of darkness and poison and attacks the two trees. Their light is drained. The world falls into deep darkness again. Melkor steals the Silmarils and flees back across the sea to Middle-earth. Everything that follows is a long chain reaction from this theft. Fëanor, in grief and rage, swears a terrible oath with his sons. They will reclaim the Silmarils at any cost, against any foe, friend, or enemy alike. They will not rest until they have them back. This oath is like a crack that runs through the entire history of the First Age, shattering alliances and dragging countless people into tragedy. To chase Melkor, whom Fëanor renames Morgoth, the Black Foe, the elves will abandon the safety of Aman, rebel against the Valar, and return to Middle-earth in force. Many will die before they even reach its shores. Blood will be spilled between kin. The sea itself will carry the weight of their sins, all for 3 jewels, locked with the light of a dead age. If this sounds distant from hobbits and ringwraiths, that's part of the beauty of Tolkien's lore. The world you see in The Lord of the Rings sits on top of layers of history like this, buried but not forgotten. Characters speak of ancient griefs, lost kingdoms, old grudges, and behind each of those words lies an age like this one, full of choices that made their future smaller or darker. When the elves return to Middle-earth, they don't come as scattered wanderers. They arrive as exiles with burning purpose. They establish kingdoms in the far northwest of the continent, in a region called Beleriand. There, under blue mountains and along wide rivers, they build cities and fortresses meant to withstand Morgoth's onslaught. Some dwell underground in glittering halls, others live in hidden, forest-guarded realms. Each kingdom has its own character and culture, but they share something crucial, a sense that they are fighting an impossible war. Because Morgoth is not just a dark lord in a fortress. He is the great enemy, a being of nearly godlike power. His stronghold, Angband, is a nightmare citadel in the far north, a complex of pits, towers, and ash-choked plains guarded by dragons and balrogs, fiery spirits twisted to his will. The wars that follow are vast and tragic, dwarfing even the great battles of the Third Age. Elven armies clash with legions of orcs. Dragons newly unveiled burn entire hosts. Balrogs cut down champions who might have changed the course of history. Great fortresses like Gondolin and Nargothrond rise and eventually fall. Heroes like Fingolfin, Beren, Luthien, and Turin struggle against overwhelming darkness, each leaving marks that will be remembered in song even thousands of years later. Out of these tales, 2 things especially matter for the world of The Lord of the Rings. First, we see a pattern emerge. No matter how great the hero, no matter how glorious the fortress, nothing built in defiance of the deepest doom can stand forever. Prideful oaths, unbending vengeance, and despair all help Morgoth's shadow do its work. Victory, when it arrives, never comes cheaply. Second, we see that men are not an afterthought. They awaken later than the elves, under a rising sun, and enter this already complicated world with its old grudges and shining legends. Some fall under Morgoth's sway, lured by fear or promises of power. Others ally themselves with the elves, forming friendships and bloodlines that will echo much later in characters you already know. One of these mortal houses will ultimately produce Aragorn. Another will produce the kings of Númenor, a people who will become central to the making of the ring itself. Eventually, even a foe as immense as Morgoth is overthrown. The final war against him is so catastrophic that it shatters entire regions. Beleriand, with all its cities and rivers and memories, is ruined. Much of it sinks beneath the sea, lost forever. The world is not quite the same shape afterward. But Morgoth's defeat doesn't leave a clean slate. His greatest lieutenant survives. Sauron begins his existence not as a horned monster or a lidless flaming eye, but as a Maya, a lesser Ainur, like a divine craftsman's spirit. In origin, he is not evil. He's drawn to order, structure, and efficiency, things that can be good in the right hands. But like many of Tolkien's fallen figures, he chooses the path that gratifies his desire for control. Serving Morgoth, he learns how to dominate minds, twist creations, and forge instruments of power. When Morgoth is finally exiled from the world entirely, Sauron does not vanish with him. He slips into hiding, in a broken world full of scattered peoples, fading memories, and shattered kingdoms. Sauron sees opportunity. This is one of the key themes of Tolkien's lore. Evil isn't easily destroyed. It changes shape. It returns smaller, but more focused. Morgoth's shadow is cosmic and overwhelming, like an infection in the entire fabric of reality. Sauron, by contrast, becomes precise, surgical. He learns to put his malice into objects, symbols, and systems. And somewhere, deep in the very concept of how this world works, a terrifying idea takes root. If you can bind your power into a thing, then whoever holds that thing will be bound to you. After the fall of Morgoth, a new age begins. The focus of the story shifts west to the men who fought faithfully alongside the elves. As a reward for their courage and loyalty, they are given a gift, a great island in the western sea, closer to the undying lands than any mortal land should be. There they found the kingdom of Númenor. Think of Númenor as the missing link between the legendary world of the First Age and the more grounded realms of Gondor and Arnor in The Lord of the Rings. The Númenorians are taller, stronger, and longer-lived than other men. Their ships sail further. Their cities gleam with white stone and tall towers. They learn from the elves, but remain firmly mortal. And in that tension, between extraordinary greatness and the certainty of death, the seeds of their downfall are planted. At first, they are noble. They explore, they teach, they help. They sail east and come as friends, bringing knowledge and craft to less advanced peoples. But as their power grows, so does their pride. They become jealous of the elves' immortality and of the undying lands they are forbidden to set foot in. That prohibition feels like a locked door in a house they helped build. They begin to ask questions. Why must we die? Why are we denied the West? Is this gift of men, this mortal life, really a gift at all? Into this growing unease steps Sauron. By now he has returned to Middle-earth and begun forging his own dark empire. In the land of Mordor, he builds Barad-dûr, the Dark Tower, but he is challenged by Númenor's power. Their fleets and armies can match and overwhelm him. When a Númenorian king sails to Middle-earth in a show of force, Sauron does something unexpected. He surrenders. Not in truth, of course, but outwardly he gives himself up, allowing himself to be taken as a prisoner back to their island. It's a calculated move. As Morgoth once corrupted elven hearts through lies and flattery, Sauron now sets out to corrupt Númenor from within. He whispers that death need not be accepted, that the so-called gift is really a cruel limitation. that the gods of the West are hoarding immortality and the secrets of life. He introduces dark worship, temples of fire and blood, and slowly the great island kingdom turns towards shadow. You can feel the echo of this when Boromir dreams of power, or when Denethor stares too long into the seeing stone and loses hope. Sauron rarely forces, he tempts, he offers something people already want, then nudges them just far enough off the path. But his most infamous work is still ahead, because in Middle-earth, in the elven land of Eregion, Sauron will soon teach the art of ring-making. Before he becomes a flaming symbol of terror, Sauron tries another mask, that of a wise and fair teacher. Taking on a beautiful form and a soothing name, he comes to the elven smiths in Eregion and introduces himself as a bringer of knowledge. The elves at this time are deeply interested in craft, making things that don't just function, but embody meaning. Among them, Celebrimbor, a master smith and descendant of Fëanor, is curious and ambitious. Sauron offers what seems like a noble idea. What if the elves could preserve their realms against the slow decay of time? What if they could heal lands, strengthen beauty, resist the weariness that hangs over the world after ages of war? To many elves, still grieving the loss of Beleriand and the wounds of the First Age, that sounds irresistible. Under Sauron's guidance, they study the art of forging rings of power. These lesser rings can enhance what their bearers already are: strength, wisdom, influence, longevity. But a few special ones are crafted with extraordinary skill. The Great Rings. 9 are given to men, 7 to the dwarf lords, and 3, most carefully made, are for the elves. What Sauron doesn't tell them is that he has been working on another ring in secret. In the fires of Mount Doom, he pours a terrifying amount of his own will and essence into a single master ring. When he puts it on, he can see into and dominate the minds of those who wear the other rings. Their gifts become shackles. Their extended lives become cages. That is the one ring you see in the Lord of the Rings. Not just a magic item that makes you invisible, but a condensed fragment of Sauron's power, tied directly to his existence. Destroying it will not merely ruin a tool, it will unmake a part of him. But at the beginning, the plan doesn't work perfectly. When Sauron first puts on the One Ring, the elves feel the sudden touch of his will. They sense the trap, and, in a rare moment of clear, unified resistance, they remove their own rings and hide them. The 3 aren't claimed by Sauron. Instead, they are kept by wise and careful guardians. In later days, Elrond, Galadriel, and Gandalf will bear them. This failure enrages Sauron. He settles for what he can get. The rings given to men and dwarves remain under the shadow of his influence. The dwarf lords become fiercer and greedier, though they prove too stubborn to be fully enslaved. The men, however, are not so resistant. The 9 who accept the rings are great kings, warriors and sorcerers in their own time. Their power and lifespans grow and grow and grow. But as centuries pass, the gifts of the rings hollow out. Their identities erode. They become wraiths, no longer truly alive but not allowed to die. Bound entirely to Sauron's will, they become the Nazgûl, the ring-wraiths, who will one day ride in black robes hunting a hobbit through the Shire. That black rider at the gate of a quiet village? He's the end result of a story that began with the music of the Ainur, moved through the pride of Fëanor, the fall of Númenor, and the subtle temptations of a Maya obsessed with control. By the time The Lord of the Rings begins, you are walking across a stage set by thousands of years of choices like these. When Númenor finally falls, it doesn't just sink like an ordinary island. Under Sauron's poisonous influence, the last and most powerful Númenorian king decides to do the unthinkable. He raises a fleet so vast it darkens the sea and sails west, intending to invade the Undying Lands themselves and seize immortality. This is a crime against the very design of the world. In response, the One intervenes. The world is physically changed. Númenor is destroyed, swallowed by the sea in a cataclysm that becomes legend, an echo you may recognize in other mythologies of a drowned proud land. Sauron's physical form is obliterated in the upheaval, so destroyed that he can never again appear fair or human-like. From now on, he will be associated with shadow, fire, and the unbearable weight of his own malice. But not all Númenorians followed their king into madness. Some, led by Elendil and his sons, fled the island before its doom, faithful to the old friendship with the Elves, and loyal to the higher will behind the world. Their ships reach Middle-earth, battered but not broken. There they establish two great realms, Arnor in the north and Gondor in the south. You've seen the ruins of these kingdoms in The Lord of the Rings. Broken watchtowers on windswept hills, long-forgotten fortresses half swallowed by forest, statues staring over ancient roads. These are the remnants of Númenor's legacy on the mainland, a legacy that will fade but never entirely vanish. Sauron, stripped of fair form but still burning with will, returns to Mordor. Now there is no more pretense of benevolence, no more beautiful masks. He pours what remains of his strength into rebuilding his power, into finishing Barad-dûr, into rallying orcs and trolls, and corrupted men under his banner. The One Ring, far from being a mere accessory, is now essential to him. It anchors his spirit, giving it a weight in the world it might otherwise lack. The stage is set for one last colossal clash between the Free Peoples and the Shadow rising from Mordor. But that, as you know, will not be the end either. In the Second Age's climactic moments, Elendil and his sons form an alliance with the Elves. Gil-galad, the High King of the Noldor, stands beside the High King of Men. Together, they lead a last alliance against Sauron. You've seen fragments of this in the opening of the film adaptations. Vast armies marching across bleak plains, banners flapping, the Dark Tower looming ahead. What you're seeing there is the tip of a massive historical iceberg, the long, bitter culmination of everything from Fëanor's oath to Númenor's pride. The war is long and costly. Sieges drag on for years. Countless lives are spent holding lines that will eventually falter. Dwarves, men, elves, all leave bones on the blackened fields near Mordor. But finally, Sauron himself comes down from his tower to break the siege personally, wielding the One Ring as a weapon, his strikes scattering warriors like leaves in a storm. He kills Gil-galad, he kills Elendil. But in that moment of apparent triumph, something happens that Sauron doesn't predict. Isildur, Elendil's son, takes up the broken hilt of his father's sword and strikes the ring from Sauron's hand. Deprived of the object into which he poured so much of himself, Sauron's physical form collapses. His armies break. The Dark Tower falls silent. This could have been the true end of his story. It almost is. Standing over the fires of Mount Doom, holding the One Ring, Isildur is urged to destroy it. He's told that this is the only way to be rid of Sauron forever. But after everything he's lost, his father, his king, his homeland long drowned beneath the sea, Isildur looks at the ring and sees not just a weapon of the enemy, but a kind of compensation. He calls it Wergild, a blood price. He claims it for himself. With that decision, history doesn't end. It loops. Isildur doesn't become another Sauron. He never has the time. He is ambushed. The ring slips from his finger as he tries to escape invisibly, and it sinks into the river. But that one choice, to keep the ring instead of unmaking it, allows Sauron's spirit to linger in the world, bound to this single small object that will call to him across the centuries. And so, the mighty war of the Last Alliance leads not to a clean resolution, but to a long, uneasy watch. The ring is lost, Sauron is diminished, the kingdoms of men begin to fade. The elves feel time pressing on them more heavily. And somewhere, in the quiet corners of the world, small folk live lives so untouched by these events that they turn into half-remembered tales, stories told by the fire about kings, towers, and dark lords no one really expects to ever see again. That is where the Shire comes in. That is where Bilbo, idly reaching for a ring in the dark beneath a mountain, unknowingly picks up the loose end of a story older than his entire language. And that is where our journey through this lore will turn from world-spanning history to the small, intimate choices of very unlikely heroes. The Shire sits far away from drowned islands and fallen towers. It's a patchwork of fields and hedgerows, of little rivers and round doors. Its people worry about seed potatoes, birthday presents, and who said what at last week's market. If someone mentions kings, it's in songs so old they've turned into nonsense rhymes. The idea that the fate of the world could ever depend on such a place would be, to them, a good punchline. That's exactly why it works. Powers like Sauron don't look for threats in gardens and quiet lanes. He watches for armies, for rival kings, for elven lords and dwarf lords wielding famous blades. He's not scanning the fields around Hobbiton to see if anyone there might one day carry his doom. But even in the Shire, the long shadow of the past shows up, just in a smaller, more domestic shape. It comes as a mystery in the pocket of Bilbo Baggins. He finds the ring in the dark, under a mountain, in a series of events that look, on the surface, like pure chance. A lost hand, a riddle game, a panicked escape. He slips it on without understanding what it truly is. To Bilbo, it's a lucky trinket, something that makes him invisible so he can dodge trolls and goblins and unwanted relatives. Yet the ring is never just a tool. It isn't neutral. It has memory. It remembers lying on Sauron's hand as he crushed warriors on the slopes of Mount Doom. It remembers spinning away from him into a cold river. It remembers centuries in the dark with a creature once named Smeagol, who renamed it My Precious, and forgot the sound of his own name. It knows, in some deep, wordless way, that its purpose is to get back to its maker. And so, it waits. To understand how dangerous the ring really is, you can look at what it does to Gollum. Smeagol begins life as something recognizably close to a hobbit. Curious, perhaps a little too much so, fond of secrets and hidden things. On a riverbank, while fishing with his cousin, Déagol, he encounters the ring at a point when its dormant power stirs. Déagol finds it in the water. Smeagol sees it, wants it, and in the space of a single moment makes a choice that will define centuries. He kills for it. Under the ring's influence, his life stretches unnaturally long. His body warps. His mind splits around an obsession, torn between a shriveled remnant of conscience and a gnawing hunger. He is both victim and perpetrator, someone to fear and someone to pity. The ring doesn't simply make him invisible. It makes him smaller, inwardly, even as it inflates his lifespan. That's what it does. It magnifies what's already there. Ambition grows into tyranny. Fear grows into cowardice. Curiosity grows into meddling. The ring doesn't care whether the soul it touches is noble or petty. It just pushes, always in the direction of possession and control. Even Bilbo, one of the most gentle-hearted bearers it ever has, feels a sharp, possessive clutch when someone suggests he should pass it on. When Bilbo returns to the Shire after his adventure, everyone thinks he's just become odd. Stranger. Too fond of maps and dwarven songs, they don't see the subtle threads of corruption tightening around him. They only sense that he hasn't aged quite right, that his eyes sometimes look both too old and too bright. Decades pass. The world outside shifts. The last king of Gondor is still centuries gone. The line of Isildur wanders in the north, reduced to a handful of grim rangers, watching borders no one remembers. Elves quietly depart over the sea. Necromantic whispers gather again in the east. Shadows lengthen in Mirkwood. In distant lands, black banners are reforged, and in a hobbit hole under the hill, an old bachelor plans a birthday party and writes a farewell speech. Gandalf the Grey walks in the space between these worlds. He isn't just a kindly old wizard who makes fireworks and knows interesting stories. In the deeper lore, he is one of the Maiar, the same order of being that produced Sauron, but sent into Middle-earth for a very different purpose. Along with 4 others, the Astari, he's given a task: help the peoples of the world resist the shadow, not by dominating them, but by strengthening their courage and wisdom. There's a catch. The Astari are bound into old, fragile bodies. They're not allowed to unleash godlike power. Their job is to advise, to nudge, to encourage resistance, not to rule from on high. If they try to take too much control, they risk becoming the very thing they were sent to oppose. Some fail that test. Saruman, the White, begins as the head of their order, the most knowledgeable, especially regarding the devices and lore of the enemy. But knowledge carries its own temptations. Just as Sauron once used fair forms and persuasive voices to corrupt others, Saruman starts to believe that only someone like him, armed with the enemy's tools, can truly win. The line between studying evil and adopting its methods blurs. Gandalf chooses a different path. He wanders, he befriends, he listens. He spends time in places like the Shire, talking with hobbits, smoking pipeweed, paying attention to kindness and hospitality as if they mattered as much as armies and alliances. So when he notices Bilbo's odd aging, when he hears hints about a magic ring, he doesn't dismiss it. He files it away in that deep, patient mind of his, like a note on a shelf. It will sit there, unresolved, until the world darkens enough that this small mystery begins to smell like something far more dangerous. When the clues finally line up, they do so with a quiet, dreadful click. Years after Bilbo's party, after the ring has passed, reluctantly, into Frodo's keeping, Gandalf returns to the Shire with a gravity that no amount of fireworks can soften. He's been reading old scrolls, traveling to forgotten archives, hunting stories of rings and kings and broken blades. In dusty records from Gondor, he finds Isildur's own description of the ring he took from Sauron's hand. The words are chilling, not because of what they reveal, but because of how familiar they have begun to sound. A plain gold band, letters revealed only by fire, a will of its own. Back in Bag End, Gandalf tosses Frodo's ring into the fireplace and waits. The gold glows but does not melt. When it cools, a script appears. Alien, curling letters, harsh and elegant. You know the meaning. One ring to rule them all. In that moment, centuries of history and myth collapse into a single point in a hobbit's kitchen. The object that bound Sauron's power, that corrupted kings, that refused to die with its maker, is lying on a simple wooden table next to a tea kettle. LOTR becomes present tense. The conversation that follows is one of the densest lore moments in the entire saga. Gandalf has to compress ages into a few urgent explanations. He speaks about the history of the Rings of Power, about the 9 and the 7 and the 3, about the forging in Eregion and the trick in Mordor. He can't tell Frodo everything, but he tells him enough for one terrible truth to come through. This cannot be hidden. It cannot be used safely. It cannot be simply thrown away. It has to be destroyed where it was made. And that means a journey into the heart of Mordor. The Hobbit world, bounded by rivers and hills, and family gossip, cracks open. Words like Nazgul, Mordor, and Barad-dûr spill into a conversation that should have been about seed cakes. The distance between Bag End and Mount Doom isn't just miles. It's layers of reality stacked on top of each other. A small, frightened hobbit is being asked to step through all of them. Frodo's choice isn't made in a vacuum. You can feel the weight of all the earlier choices in the way he responds. Fëanor clung to his jewels and swore an oath that broke kingdoms. Númenorian kings clung to life so fiercely they tried to storm the realm of the gods. Isildur clung to the ring as payment for sorrow and loss. Against that background, the decision of a hobbit in a cluttered room sounds quiet, but it's revolutionary. He agrees to take the ring away from the Shire, not because he trusts himself to use it, not because he wants power, but because he understands, however dimly, that to keep it is to endanger everything and everyone he loves. That pattern of letting go when every instinct screams to hold tighter is one of the main threads running through the lore. Later, he will offer the ring to others. To Aragorn, who refuses, knowing too well what it did to his ancestors. To Galadriel, who trembles before it, glimpses what she might become, terrible and worshipped, and then steps back, laughing in relief. Each refusal hums with all the times that others said yes. If you zoom out, you can see this as the world trying, again and again, to correct its own story. The fellowship that forms in Rivendell is, in a way, a living map of that story. Elves and men, dwarves and hobbits, a wizard, a man of Gondor, a prince of Mirkwood, a dwarf from Erebor, each one carrying a piece of some older tale of ancient wars, of dragon hordes, of fading forests, of drowned islands. Their gathering isn't just a tactical decision. It's a kind of response to all the divisions and betrayals that came before. Where Fëanor's oath turned kin upon kin, this company tries to bind different peoples into a shared, fragile purpose. The road they take is paved with old stories. When they attempt to cross the Redhorn Pass and are turned back by cruel weather, it's not just a snowstorm, it's Caradhras, a mountain with a will of its own, echoing the age when the very bones of the world were reshaped by powers at war. Nature itself remembers that conflict. Forced beneath the earth, they enter Moria, Khazad-dûm. Once it was the greatest of dwarven halls, full of light and craftsmanship, a place where Mithril, the mysterious shining metal born deep under the mountains, was mined and forged. In The Lord of the Rings, they walk through it in its afterlife, ruined, dark, filled with drums in the deep. Behind that ruin lies another lore thread. Dwarves digging too greedily and too deep woke a Balrog, a fallen mire of fire and shadow that had slept since the First Age. Its awakening destroyed Durin's line in that hall and turned a place of beauty into a tomb. Again, the pattern repeats. A desire for more wealth, more discovery, opens a door that should have remained closed. When Gandalf confronts that Balrog, it isn't just a duel between two powerful beings. It's a collision between past and present. An ancient terror from Morgoth's time meets a Maya who chose humility and limitation. Their fall together into the abyss is almost like two layers of history being torn out of the world at once. On the bridge, when Gandalf stands and forbids passage, you're not just watching a wizard buy time for his companions. You're watching one of the original servants of the One put his life on the line against one of the original corruptors, deep under stone that remembers both their masters. And the little hobbits, our window into all this, can't possibly see that full picture. They see loss, grief, a friend fallen. The lore wraps around them like a tapestry they can't fully read, but they are walking on its threads all the same. From the darkness of Moria, the story moves into Lothlorien, a realm hanging on the edge of time. Galadriel's land is one of the last, brightest expressions of what elven realms can be when sustained by the three rings. Time feels strange there. Seasons linger. Memory feels almost solid. The light is gentler, like a surviving echo of the two trees' glow, filtered through leaves and water. That isn't an accident. Galadriel is one of the oldest living figures in Middle-earth by this point, someone who walked in the light of those trees and heard the music more closely than most. She carries one of the three rings, and through it she holds back the full force of decline for a little longer. Her power is not about conquering others. It's about preservation in the face of inevitable fading. But that preservation comes with a cost. If the one ring is destroyed, the three will lose much of their potency. Realms like Lothlorien will fade quickly. What has been kept unnaturally beautiful will age, diminish, or transform. Helping Frodo complete his quest is, for Galadriel, not just a strike against Sauron. It's a choice to allow her own works to pass away. When Frodo offers her the ring, the temptation is sharper because of who she is and what she has seen. She knows domination. She has seen what Morgoth and Sauron did with their powers. She also knows what she could do differently, or so she tells herself in that moment of trial. Radiant, terrible beauty, worship, an enforced peace of fear and awe. Her refusal is one of the great turning points of the story's moral arc. A being who stands near the root of the world's history chooses loss over control. That choice is mirrored in smaller ways by the hobbits, by Aragorn, by Faramir later on. Each time someone chooses not to grasp, not to keep, the ring's long chain of possession frays a little. The Third Age is filled with such decisions, large and small, each one pushing against the old gravitational pull of pride. Meanwhile, in the wider world, the long consequences of Númenor's fall and the fading of the North are playing out. Aragorn, known at first only as Strider, is the last direct heir of Isildur, a man carrying both the burden of that notorious failure and the remote dignity of kingship long denied. As chieftain of the Dúnedain in the north, he moves through a landscape of ruins and half-remembered names. Weathertop was once a watchtower. The road through the wilds was once a well-kept highway. The Shire, though its residents don't know it, lies under his secret protection. The lore here works in layers of irony. Hobbits joke about big people and their strange ways, not realizing their quiet walks and full pantries are made possible by men who live and die in the margins to keep trolls, and worse, at bay. The world is full of these asymmetries, sacrifices made in silence so that others can live as if danger doesn't exist. Aragorn's reluctance to claim his kingship isn't just modesty. It's fear of becoming a new version of the old story. He knows what happened to the kings of Númenor, how their desire for immortality poisoned their wisdom, how their might turned to oppression, how their great island sank. He knows that Isildur's choice with the ring nearly doomed all their descendants. If he takes the throne of Gondor, he steps directly into that line of fire. His journey, then, is not just about earning a crown. It's about proving, to himself as much as anyone, that kingship can be something other than the prelude to catastrophe. Every time he refuses the ring, every time he chooses service over glory, every time he bends his will to the needs of others rather than to his own hunger for identity, he is rewriting his bloodline story. The Lord of the Rings as lore is as much about these spiritual inheritances as it is about geography and battles. While the Fellowship is splintered and scattered, Sauron's strategies reveal a different side of the world's deep history. He doesn't just attack with orcs and trolls. He exploits old grievances. Among men, he whispers into the ears of those whose lands once felt dominated by Númenorian kings. Among the Easterlings and the Haradrim, he offers alliance, power, revenge. From their point of view, the West isn't a purely noble cause. Gondor and its allies descend from conquerors as well as benefactors. Tolkien's lore is careful about this. Evil is absolute in some senses. Sauron really is a dark power bent on domination, but the human beings who fight for him are often tangled in their own histories. Sam's brief glimpse of a dead soldier from the south, wondering what lies brought him there and what he dreamed about, is one of the clearest moments where the story acknowledges how complex the world really is beneath the banners. The ring, again, cuts through all of this as a kind of simplifier of evil. It doesn't care about politics, history, grievances, or ideals. It reduces all of that to one axis. Will you serve domination, or will you resist it even at a cost? That's why it must be destroyed, not used. Every age has tried to manage evil through power. The Valar constrained Morgoth with force. Númenor tried to hold the world in its grip. Elves forged rings to preserve their realms against time. Even the White Council once hoped to push the shadow back gradually, cautiously, through layered wisdom. But the One Ring's existence puts all those strategies under a harsh light. You can't dominate domination without becoming part of it. The only real path out of the pattern is to unmake the tool, not to continue the cycle of using it better than the last tyrant. As the story narrows toward Mordor, the lore narrows with it. Mount Doom isn't just any volcano. It's the place Sauron chose in the Second Age as his forging ground because its fires are bound to the deeper fabric of the world. The same creative destructive energies that the Valar manipulated when they formed mountains and seas burn here in a focused, violent stability. When Frodo and Sam crawl across the ashes and slag of Gorgoroth, they are not only exhausted travelers, they are tiny figures moving through the physical heart of the world's corrupted creativity. The land itself reflects the long influence of Sauron and Morgoth before him. Slag heaps, fumes, lifeless plains. Where the two trees once bathed valleys in silver and gold, here the only light is a dull, angry glow. Nature, under the touch of malice, is not merely destroyed. It is bent into something joyless and efficient, a machine landscape feeding a war. This scarred ground is the opposite number to places like LOTR or the Shire, where those realms show what happens when power is used to nurture and protect. Mordor shows what happens when power is used to organize and extract. Both are, in different ways, answers to the question, what will you do with your ability to shape the world? Frodo is not a shaper, not in the grand sense. He's not a craftsman like Fëanor, not a commander like Elendil, not a Maya like Gandalf. His power is almost entirely inward, the ability to keep putting one foot in front of the other, to keep holding on to a promise even when its benefits to him personally have vanished. As the ring grows heavier, spiritually, psychologically, even physically, the entire history of its making seems to press down on him. All the pride that went into it, all the cruelty it enabled, all the years it spent in dark corners, whispering and waiting, are concentrated into a weight that a hobbit's shoulders were never meant to bear. And still, he walks. By the time Frodo reaches the crack of doom, one more pattern has emerged in the lore, the unexpected role of pity. Way back on that riverbank, Sméagol's first murder could have been his last act. His family could have killed him in punishment. Later, the people who cast him out could have hunted him down. In the tunnels of the Misty Mountains, Bilbo could have ended his life when he had him at sword point. Even in the wilds, when Aragorn, Gandalf, and others discuss Gollum, there are moments when a swift knife would have seemed the sensible choice. Again and again, characters choose to spare him. Not because he's safe, not because he's innocent, but because something in them recoils from killing a wretched, broken creature who has been hollowed out by the same power they are fighting. That pity is repeatedly framed as a risk. Gollum is dangerous. He betrays, he lies. He leads Frodo and Sam into deadly paths. He attacks. He is, in so many ways, a living argument for the hard-hearted approach that says, some people are too far gone. The safest thing is to eliminate them. And yet, at the very end, when Frodo reaches the place of decision, he fails. He claims the ring. In that unbearable moment, the long arc of history seems to close exactly where it began, with a being turning away from surrender and choosing to possess. The chain has held. The ring has won. The world's deepest patterns of pride and control reassert themselves, even in the heart of the most unlikely hero. It's Gollum, miserable, treacherous, pitiable Gollum, who breaks it. Not because he repents, not because he suddenly chooses courage. He attacks Frodo out of pure, obsessive desire. He bites off his finger, takes the ring, and rejoices. But in that frenzy, he falls. The ring goes into the fire with him. The world is saved not by a pristine moral victory, but by a mixture of failure and unintentional sacrifice, made possible only because earlier characters chose mercy when cruelty would have been easier. The lore here is subtle. It suggests that the music of the Ainur, that first great theme, has room in it even for mistakes, for collapses, for half-ruined creatures still playing a part they don't understand. Ilúvatar's insistence in that beginning that no discord can be introduced that he cannot turn to a higher purpose echoes faintly in Gollum's fall. Evil is not redeemed. It is turned. Pity, weakness, and unintended consequences all braid together into the one outcome that actually breaks the ring. When the ring unravels in the fire, the unmaking cascades outward. Barad-dûr collapses. The Nazgûl are consumed. Armies lose their direction and scatter or fall. The eye goes dark. For the first time since the Second Age, the world is truly free of Sauron's active will. But the lore makes it clear. This isn't a reset to some pristine golden era. It's the end of one age and the beginning of another. The Elves will leave. The Three Rings, their power tied to the fate of the One, will no longer sustain places like Rivendell and Lothlorien in that half-timeless state. Númenor will never rise again. Beleriand lies under the sea. Many of the great works and wisdoms of earlier ages will pass into legend or be lost entirely. This is the long defeat Galadriel once spoke of, the sense that, in the vast arc of Arda's history, victories are always partial and temporary, that beauty is always endangered, that decline is built into the fabric of the world. And yet, within that long defeat, small meaningful wins matter. A king is crowned in Gondor, wise enough to respect the boundaries between his realm and the Shire. Old alliances are renewed, between elves and men, between men and dwarves, between the realms of Rohan and Gondor. The Shire itself, briefly scarred by Saruman's bitter, petty cruelty, heals. Trees grow again. New songs are written. The lore doesn't end with apocalypse. It ends with a bittersweet mixture. Some characters depart into a realm beyond the circles of the world. Some remain to build gardens and write histories. Some sleep in stone or sail under stars. If you step back far enough, you can see the full span. Music at the beginning. Pride and rebellion. Jewels and oaths. Islands raised and drowned. Rings forged and lost. Kings rising and falling. Hobbits cooking second breakfast, unaware that their fields sit on the foundations of all of this. When Frodo sails west with Gandalf, Elrond, and Galadriel, it's not an escape in the cheap sense. It's the closing of a chapter written about beings who have carried too much history in their bones. The next page will be written mostly by men, in an age where magic and myth slip further from sight. That, too, is part of the design. What, then, is the Lord of the Rings lore in the deepest sense? It isn't just a list of dates or genealogies, though those exist, it isn't just a catalogue of who forged which ring or which king ruled which city. Those details are there, but they're scaffolding. Underneath, the lore is a set of recurring questions. What happens when power is treated as possession instead of responsibility? How much of our past must we carry, and how much can we let go? Is evil something you can defeat with its own tools, or must you accept loss to truly overcome it? Why do small acts of mercy and faithfulness sometimes matter more than legendary heroics? Every age in this world answers those questions differently. The First Age answers with brilliance and tragedy. The Second Age answers with pride and drowning. The Third Age answers with halting, conflicted courage, where the victory depends as much on a hobbit's pity and a broken creature's fall as on any army on the Pelennor fields. When you look at the ring itself, you see all of these answers reflected. It is Morgoth's philosophy compressed: rule, control, bend. It is Sauron's obsession perfected. It is Númenor's fear of death given shape. It is Isildur's grief turned into entitlement. It is Gollum's hunger. It is Boromir's desperation for a weapon that will save his city. It is Galadriel's temptation to become a beautiful terror. It is Frodo's burden. Destroyed, it becomes something else. Its absence opens a space. In that emptied space, ordinary life becomes possible again, at least for a while. People trading in markets, rebuilding walls, planting trees. Songs no longer only about survival, but about joy. It's a thin, fragile piece, but in Tolkien's world, fragility doesn't equal worthlessness. If anything, it makes the moments of peace more precious. And deep behind all of it, as the ages turn and the seas shift and the stars wheel across the sky, the echo of that first music remains. The Ainur's themes: beauty, freedom, love, pride, rebellion, grief, keep playing in variations. New voices join, discord rises and is answered. Motifs repeat, sometimes twisted, sometimes redeemed. The lore isn't static. It's a composition in progress, with Ilúvatar as the only one who can hear the entire piece at once. From that perspective, even the smallest choices in a hobbit's life can be part of the great harmony. A refusal to kill a wretched creature. A decision to leave home for the sake of a world you've never seen. A king choosing to kneel to hobbits and call them friends. These might look trivial next to the raising of mountains, or the sinking of islands, but in a story that began with music, every note counts. The Lord of the Rings lore invites you to do more than memorize who ruled where and when. It invites you to hear the themes behind those details, to notice how the same questions echo in different keys across millennia, to see how a golden ring on a hobbit's chain isn't just a plot device, but the condensed memory of a world's long struggle with what power is for. And once you start hearing those echoes, you can't unhear them. You see the shadow of Númenor in Minas Tirith's white walls. You feel the light of the two trees in Galadriel's file. You glimpse the anguish of Fëanor in any craftsman who loves their creation a little too much. You recognize that every time someone in this world is offered the chance to take, to keep, to dominate, and says no, they're adding a new, unexpected harmony line to a song that once seemed fated to end in a single deafening chord of tyranny. Somewhere in that music, a hobbit's laugh and the clink of a mug in the Green Dragon Tavern are part of the score too, and that might be the most comforting piece of lore of all.